The introduction to the Cold War, often described as the prolonged geopolitical tension between the United States and the Soviet Union following World War II, sets the stage for understanding this complex era marked by ideological, political, and military rivalry. This period, lasting roughly from 1940 to 1991, was not characterized by direct military confrontation between the two superpowers, but rather by a series of proxy wars, nuclear arms buildups, and intense political maneuvering. At its core, the Cold War was a struggle for global influence and supremacy, centered around the competing ideologies of capitalism, championed by the United States, and communism, represented by the Soviet Union. Understanding this context is crucial because it shaped international relations and the global order in the latter half of the 20th century, influencing everything from military strategies to economic policies and cultural exchanges. A significant aspect of the Cold War was the nuclear arms race, which epitomized the constant threat of mutual assured destruction. The Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962, for example, brought the world to the brink of nuclear war when the Soviet Union placed nuclear missiles in Cuba, triggering a tense standoff with the United States. This event illustrated the precarious nature of Cold War tensions and the ever-present risk of escalation into global conflict. Another example is the Marshall Plan, through which the United States provided economic assistance to rebuild Western European economies after World War II. This initiative aimed to curb the spread of communism by promoting economic stability and prosperity in capitalist nations. Supporters of the Cold War context highlight the era's role in promoting advancements in technology and space exploration, notably leading to the space race and the eventual moon landing in 1969. However, critics point out the destructive consequences of proxy wars in regions like Vietnam and Korea, where superpower rivalries led to significant loss of life and long-term political instability. The Cold War's complexity is amplified by challenges and controversies, such as the ethical implication of espionage and covert operations conducted by entities like the CIA and the KGB. Additionally, alternative viewpoints argue that the Cold War was not merely a bipolar conflict, but also involved numerous other nations, each with their own agendas and influences. In connecting to other aspects of this topic, the Cold War's introduction highlights its pervasive influence on global affairs, affecting everything from decolonization movements to the development of international organizations like the United Nations. Understanding this context is vital to comprehending the subsequent geopolitical landscape and the lasting impact of Cold War dynamics in contemporary international relations. The ideological differences between capitalism and communism formed a central pillar of the Cold War tensions between superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. Capitalism is an economic system characterized by private ownership of the means of production and operates on principles like free markets, competition, and consumer choice. In contrast, communism, as conceptualized by Karl Marx, advocates for a classless society where the means of production are owned communally, aiming to eliminate social inequalities. These opposing ideologies significantly fueled Cold War tensions as they not only dictated the economic and political structures of the two nations, but also influenced their foreign policies and global strategies. The struggle between these ideologies led to geopolitical contests, each side promoting its model as the pathway to prosperity and peace. The ideological contrast was not merely confined to rhetoric, but manifested in various global conflicts and interventions, from Europe to Asia and Latin America. One classic example illustrating this ideological clash is the Berlin blockade in 1948 to 1949, where the Soviet Union attempted to cut off Allied access to West Berlin in response to the introduction of a new currency in western parts of Germany. The U.S. and its allies responded with the Berlin airlift, delivering essential supplies to the city's residents. This event highlighted the tangible implications of ideological differences, with the capitalist West ensuring the survival of a democratic enclave within communist-controlled territory. Another example is the Korean War, 1950 to 1953, where North Korea, backed by communist allies, invaded South Korea, which was supported by US-led United Nations forces. This conflict marked a critical point where the superpowers' ideological battlefields extended into Asia, emphasizing the global stakes of the Cold War. Supporters of capitalism argue that it fosters innovation and economic efficiency driven by individual incentives. Conversely, proponents of communism claim it aims to eradicate exploitation and address socio-economic inequalities. However, both systems face critiques. Capitalism is often criticized for perpetuating inequality, while communism has been associated with authoritarian regimes and economic inefficiencies. These ideological differences not only shaped the economic and political landscapes of the respective blocs, but also influenced cultural, technological, and military dimensions of the Cold War. As the superpowers sought allies, many nations found themselves drawn into this ideological contest. These dynamics made the Cold War a multifaceted conflict that extended well beyond direct military confrontation, impacting international relations long after the fall of the Berlin Wall. The heading, Major Events and Crises: Berlin, Blockade, Cuban Missile Crisis, Korean War, delves into key flashpoints that characterize the Cold War's intense confrontation between the superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. These events were critical in shaping the geopolitical landscape of the 20th century, often bringing the world to the brink of nuclear conflict. The Berlin Blockade, 1948 to 1949, heralded one of the first major crises of the Cold War in an attempt to assert control over the entire city of Berlin. The Soviet Union blocked all ground routes to West Berlin. This led to the Berlin Airlift, an unprecedented effort by the Western Allies to supply the city via air. The blockade underscored the deep ideological divide between East and West and fortified the resolve of Western Europe and the United States to resist Soviet expansion, leading to the formation of NATO. It illustrated the lengths to which each side would go to assert dominance without engaging in direct military conflict. The Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962 is often cited as the closest the world has come to nuclear war. The discovery of Soviet missiles in Cuba, just 90 miles off the coast of the United States, led to a tense 13-day standoff. The crisis was significant because it highlighted the perils of nuclear brinkmanship and ultimately led to a more cautious approach in superpower relations, spurring agreements like the Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. The Korean War, 1950 to 1953, was another pivotal moment, marking the first significant armed conflict of the Cold War, when North Korean forces, backed by the Soviet Union and China, invaded South Korea. The United States led a United Nations coalition to repel the invasion. This conflict reinforced the policy of containment and showed that superpower tensions could escalate into proxy wars, indirectly drawing other nations into the Cold War. Opinions on these events vary. Some view these crises as necessary checks against aggression, demonstrating the importance of a firm stance against expansionist policies. Others argue they exemplified the dangers of military escalation and the constant threat of nuclear annihilation. Not without controversy, each event sparked debates about morality and strategy. The Korean War, for instance, raised questions about interventionism and the human toll of such conflicts. Meanwhile, the Cuban Missile Crisis highlighted the precariousness of having nuclear weapons as deterrents. These crises were interconnected, each influencing the strategies and policies that defined the broader Cold War era. They intensified mutual distrust, drove the arms race, and underscored the global nature of the ideological struggle, impacting international relations for decades to come. The nuclear arms race and the concept of mutually assured destruction, M8, are pivotal elements in understanding the Cold War tensions between superpowers, primarily the United States and the Soviet Union. The nuclear arms race refers to the competitive buildup of nuclear weapons by these two nations, each seeking to outdo the other in terms of stockpile size and technological sophistication. Mutually assured destruction is a doctrine of military strategy and national security policy that posits if two opposing sides both have enough nuclear weaponry to destroy each other, the likelihood of either side actually using these weapons is significantly reduced. The principle is that any nuclear attack by one would result in an inevitable and total retaliatory strike, ensuring the total annihilation of both the attacker and defender, essentially deterring both from initiating conflict. The significance of this concept in the context of the Cold War is profound. It highlights the precarious balance of terror that defined much of the era where superpowers were locked in a constant state of readiness but restrained from direct conflict by the sheer destructiveness of their arsenals. This balance was crucial in maintaining a tense but stable peace and preventing the Cold War from escalating into a full-scale nuclear conflict. Real-world examples illustrating this include the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962, where the discovery of Soviet nuclear missiles in Cuba brought the world to the brink of nuclear war. MAD was a critical factor that led both sides to seek a peaceful resolution. Another example is the Strategic Arms Limitation Talks, SALT, of the 1970s, which were diplomatic efforts to restrain the arms race and are direct outgrowths of the MAD doctrine. Acknowledging the futility of an unchecked nuclear buildup, supporters of MAD argue that it effectively prevented nuclear conflict and was a necessary evil during a volatile period. However, the concept is not without its challenges and controversies. Critics argue that it promoted an unsustainable arms race, created a climate of constant fear, and that the policy relied too heavily on the rationality of all parties involved. Moreover, the massive financial cost of maintaining such arsenals diverted resources from other societal needs. In the broader narrative of the Cold War, the nuclear arms race and MAD influenced diplomatic relations, military strategies, and international policies, fostering a complex interplay of cooperation and competition. They underscore the paradox of a war that was fought not with direct military confrontation, but through the perpetual threat of unimaginable destruction, leaving an indelible mark on international relations and military strategy even beyond the end of the Cold War.